Hi Mel.
Hi, Paul.
So we've got some really special news. We've got the Ministry of Eco Education now with added Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah, that we're linking out to all the goals.
So yeah, we've weaved them across the whole of the series of lessons and big questions. But what are the Sustainable Development Goals? Shall I read out?
Go and read out the definition.
Okay, so this comes from the United Nations Development Programme from one of the UN sort of definitions. It says the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, also known as the Global Goals, were adopted by the United Nations in 2015. And they followed on from something, Mel. What was it?
The Millennium Development Goals, which focused mainly on the global south, whereas the Sustainable Development Goals, the global goals, now look at how the Northern Hemisphere can push for change as well.
And it says then, so these goals are all about a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that by 2030 all people enjoy peace and prosperity.
Absolutely. So I first came across the goals. I'd read the Paris Agreement in 2000, early 2016. And I realized how serious our situation is. We're not, walking into this blindfold. The scientists and, the United Nations have been talking about climate change for many, many years now. Anyway, so I read the Paris Agreement. I was like, that's a wake up call, even for me. I've got a background in environmental science, but it was a wake up call. So I started looking for ways that I could change my teaching, still structured around the national curriculum because I work in a state school. So that was really important that I stuck to the curriculum because I'm duty bound to teach that. But how could I make it relevant and engaging and show young people that there is a plan? There is an idea that we need to change and which areas we need to change in. So I stumbled across, really, I can't even remember how exactly I found them, but I found this image of these 17 goals. I was like, that's genius. It's so easy to link those goals into almost all aspects of the curriculum. So, if I teach about energy, so, well, let's link it to clean energy. If I'm talking about water and drinking water, then it's SDG 6, clean water and sanitation. So very, very quickly, it was easy to pick out my lesson that I was teaching and then linking it out to the goal to show the young people that, yes, there are problems, we know there are problems, but we have a plan. Even if we don't know all of the solutions, we have a good idea of where we need to get to by 2030.
So this is a really good framework then, isn't it, for thinking about all of these, I guess you might consider them as global issues or challenges or the things going on in the world, a way to frame it in a really holistic sense. And these 17 goals are also really clear, definitive statements, like sentences, really, aren't they? So like SDG 1, no poverty.
Yeah.
There's
And
no.
there's plenty of money in the world if we a little bit share it out, and pay people a reasonable wage, whether they're farmers in the field, whether they're working in factories, or whether they're running businesses. If people are paid fairly, according to the efforts they put in, then poverty, and we've got society that supports those structures, for people who can't work. It doesn't matter if that's in the UK or in South Sudan. Everybody needs to be able to afford a reasonable way of life.
And then, so these statements and this framework, you're saying you can link it in. Do you want to go a bit deeper then in that sense of, how you as a teacher, how have you used these kind of to really bring your teaching to
In
life?
in all sorts of ways. The easiest one is not necessarily education for sustainability, but understanding about what sustainability is and how it links to all aspects of life. So I started off doing things like I'd put up the picture of the goals at the end of a lesson, say, how did this lesson link to the goals? Really simply. And I was thinking, oh, they'd pick out one, clean water. Oh, that's SDG 6, clean water and sanitation. But then they'd link it to no poverty. They'd link it to zero hunger, because without clean water, we can't grow food. They'd link it out to life below water, because if we put pollutants and don't have clean water in the first place, then we're not going to have the water for the animals on our planet. So really quickly I saw that they picked this up in a way that I hadn't even imagined they'd do. I just thought they'd say one sustainable development goal, and I've never sat down and taught them about the specifics of each goal because the text is quite long. But those icons they're iconic, in terms of the kids very quickly will know. If you say responsible consumption, they'll already be thinking about plastic pollution, about how we use our resources, how we, that circular economy, even if it's not necessarily explicit.
And then there's some great examples of schools who use those icons within their planning, or they use the SDGs. And so we've done this within the Ministry of Eco-Education curriculum, and you're the one who's done the kind of the really hard work to do this. Do you want to explain where teachers can find that and where it sits within our framework?
So when you open one of the big questions, it's right at the top in that first table of contents about how it links to the national curriculum, and there it is. Just the SDGs, the numbers that it links to. You can. We have posters on every wall, so ours have been rolled out across the all the curriculum, and so there's a poster in each classroom of the SDGs, so teachers can quickly link to it and say this is the main one it links to. But as I say, if you ask the kids, they'll link it to all sorts of other ones because they can think like that. They're that flexible. But no, in terms of the Ministry of Eco-Education, it's right there at the top of the page.
Meryl, you're a Teach SDG ambassador, is that right? And then
have been for several years now.
There's loads of other organisations who, for decades, have been doing things around SDGs. What are some of those?
So World's Largest Lesson is a first go-to. It'll explain all about the goals and what they do. An amazing team of people behind that. Malala's and people have really helped promote them. And then there's, if you go to organisations and educational resources from people like World Wildlife Fund, they'll also use the SDGs to highlight how they can be embedded in different ways. So no, that actually when you start seeing them and recognizing, the icons or just the term SDG with a number between 1 and 17, you can even use them on social media by doing hashtags and things. So they're easy to find. But in terms of educational establishments, educational organizations, focusing on environmental education, definitely they're quite well, they appear all over the place now.